The Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights in general. It is a declaration and enumeration of a person's fundamental civic and political rights. It also imposes safeguards against violations by the government, by individuals, or by groups of individuals. The Bill of Rights governs the relationship between the individual and the state. Its concern is not the relation between the individuals, between a private individual and other individuals. Application to private individuals. The Bill of Rights cannot be invoked against acts of private individuals. The Equal Protection erects no shield against private conduct, however discriminatory or wrongful. Constitutional protection applies to government action and is meant as a restraint against sovereign authority. The Bill of Rights is not meant to be invoked against private individuals and governs relations between individuals and the state. Private acts. The principle of Bill of Rights applies only to actions taken by state officials, does not necessarily mean that private individual cannot violate the liberty of another. Violation of Bill of Rights, precisely as constitutional guarantee, can be done only by public officials, but almost all these liberties are also guaranteed by Article 32 of the Civil Code, thus making private violations actionable even if the violation does not have a constitutional consequence. Due process. Article 3, Section 1. No person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall any person be denied of equal protection of laws. Article 13, Section 1 states that the Congress shall give highest priority to the enactment of measures that protect and enhance the rights of all people to human dignity, reduce social, economic, and political inequalities by equitably diffusing wealth and political power for the common good. Due process, according to Dartmouth case. It is a legal principle that the law must hear before it condemns, which proceeds upon inquiry and renders judgment only after trial. Substantive due process. The requisites. Due process of law simply means that there shall be a law prescribed in harmony with the general powers of the legislative department of the government. This law shall be reasonable in its operation. It shall be enforced according to the regular methods of procedure prescribed. It shall be applicable alike to all citizens of the state or to all of a class. Substantive due process requires that the means employed in depriving persons of property must be unduly oppressive. Generally, the minimum requirements of due process are notice and hearing, except, however, notice and hearing are not required in every case, for there are unlimited number of exceptions in view of the nature of property involved or the urgency of the need to protect the general welfare from a clear and present danger. When a party was afforded the opportunity to defend his interest in due course, there is no denial of due process. Whereas the guarantee of equal protection of laws is not a guarantee of similarity in the application of the laws upon all persons. The principle recognizes a valid classification, that is, a classification that has a reasonable foundation or rational basis and not arbitrary. Void for vagueness. Facial challenge is allowed because of possible chilling effect upon protected speech. A law is unconstitutional because it fails to accord persons fair notice of the conduct to avoid. Law enforcers have unbridled discretion in carrying out its provisions. A vague law must lack clarity and precision. Basis for void for vagueness is the lack of comprehensible standard. Vague laws violate due process. Overbreadth. Both vague for vagueness and overbreadth are unconstitutional, and the law is unconstitutional because a government purpose may not be achieved by means which sweep unnecessarily broadly and thereby invade the area of protected freedoms. The basis of overbreadth law is the means sweep unnecessarily broad. Overbroad laws invade protected freedoms. The due process in judicial proceedings. The requisites. There must be a court or tribunal clothed with judicial power to hear and determine the matter before it. The jurisdiction must be lawfully acquired over the person of the defendant or over property which is the subject of the proceeding. Service of summons is not only required to give the court jurisdiction over the person of the defendant but also to afford the latter the opportunity to be heard on the claim made against him. Thus, compliance with the rules regarding the service of summons is much an issue of due process as of jurisdiction. The defendant must be given an opportunity to be heard. The judgment must be rendered upon lawful hearing, and no decision shall be rendered by any court without expressing therein clearly and distinctly the facts and the law on which it is based. No petition for review or motion for reconsideration of a decision of the court shall be refused, due course, or denied without stating the legal basis therefor. Requisites of criminal due process. The accused is heard by a court of competent jurisdiction. The accused is proceeded against under the orderly process of law. Accused is given notice and opportunity to be heard, and judgment rendered is within the authority of the constitutional law. Due process in administrative proceedings. There are 7 cardinal rights in administrative proceedings according to the case of Ang Tibay versus CIR. The right to a hearing, which includes the right of the party interested or affected to present his own case and submit evidence in support thereof. Not only must the party be given an opportunity to present his case and to adduce evidence tending to establish the rights which he asserts, but the tribunal must consider the evidence presented. The decision of the tribunal should be supported by something, must be based on evidence. A decision with absolutely nothing to support it is a nullity. The evidence supporting a finding or conclusion must be substantial, that such relevant evidence as a reasonable mind might accept as adequate to support a conclusion. This does not include uncorroborated hearsay or rumors. The decision must be rendered on the evidence presented at the hearing, or at least contained in the record and disclosed to the parties affected. Only by confining the administrative tribunal to the evidence disclosed to the parties can the latter be protected in their right to know and meet the case against them. The body must act on its or his own independent consideration of the law and the facts of the controversy, and not simply accept the views of a subordinate in arriving at a decision. And lastly, the body must render its decision in such a manner that the parties to the proceedings can know the various issues involved and the reasons for the decisions rendered. Note that the constitutional requirement that the judgment be in writing and promulgated is not applicable to administrative decisions. Due process in labor cases. The twin requirements which constitutes the essential elements of due process. Notice. The employer must furnish the employee with 2 written notices before the termination of employment can be effected. The first is to apprise the employee of the particular acts or omissions for which his dismissal is sought, and the second informs the employee of the employer's decision to dismiss him. Hearing. Due process of law simply means giving opportunity to be heard before judgment is rendered. This procedural due process requirement is not constitutional, but merely statutory. Hence, a violation of such requirement does not render the dismissal void. The employer must be sanctioned for non-compliance with the requirements of, or for failure to observe due process. Due process in academic disciplinary proceedings. The student must be informed in writing of the nature and cause of any accusation against him. They shall have the right to answer the charges against them with the assistance of its counsel, if desired. They shall be informed of the evidence against them. They shall have the right to adduce evidence in their own behalf. The evidence must be duly considered by the investigating committee or official designated by the school authorities to hear and decide the cases. The proceeding may be summary. Cross-examination is not essential part of the investigation or hearing. The required proof in a student disciplinary action is substantial evidence. Official action must meet minimum standards of fairness to the individual, which generally encompass the right of adequate notice and a meaningful opportunity to be heard. Equal protection. All persons or things similarly situated must be similarly treated both as to rights conferred and responsibilities imposed. The scope is natural and juridical persons. However, Equal Protection Clause extends to artificial persons only insofar as their property is concerned. Requisites for a valid classification. It must apply equally to all members of the same class. It must be germane to the purpose of the law. It must rest on substantial distinction and must make real differences. And it must not be limited to existing conditions only. Equal protection simply requires that all persons or things similarly situated should be treated alike, both as to rights conferred and responsibilities imposed. It requires public bodies and institutions to treat similarly situated individuals in a similar manner. The purpose of the Equal Protection Clause is to secure every person within a state's jurisdiction against intentional and arbitrary discrimination, whether occasioned by the express terms of a statute or by its improper execution through the state's duly constituted authorities. In other words, the concept of equal justice under the law requires the state to govern impartially and may not draw distinction between individuals solely on differences that are irrelevant to a legitimate governmental objective. The standards of judicial review, the rational basis test. The classification should bear a reasonable relation to the government's purpose or legitimate state interest. Strict scrutiny test applies to legislative classifications which impermissibly interfere with the exercise of a fundamental right or operates to a peculiar disadvantage of a suspect class. Such classifications are presumed unconstitutional, and the government has the burden to prove that the classification is necessary to achieve a compelling state interest, and that is the least restrictive means to protect such interests. Standards. The Supreme Court upheld the constitutionality of an ordinance which imposed a curfew upon minors in Quezon City. In evaluating the ordinance, the court resorted to the strict scrutiny test and ruled that under legal system's own recognition of a minor's inherent lack of full rational capacity and balancing the same against the state compelling interest to promote juvenile crime, it finds that the curfew imposed is reasonably justified with the narrowly drawn exceptions and hence not constitutionally infirm. This is from the case of Spark versus Quezon City. Intermediate scrutiny test. Under this test, the government must show that the challenge classification serves important governmental objectives and must be substantially related to the achievement of those objectives. Suspect classes. This refers to classification that violates a fundamental right or prejudices a person accorded special protection by the Constitution. Suspect classes may therefore include an income-based classification. Examples of a valid classification: a Filipino female domestic working abroad. They are a class by themselves because of the special risk to their class to which their class was exposed. Land-based and sea-based Filipino overseas workers. There is dissimilarity as to work environment, safety, danger to life and limb, and the accessibility to social, civil, and spiritual activities. Office of the Ombudsman. Allowing the Ombudsman to start an investigation based on an anonymous letter does not violate Equal Protection Clause. The Office of the Ombudsman is different from other investigatory and prosecutory agencies of the government because those subject to its jurisdiction are public officials who, through official pressure and influence, can quash, delay, or dismiss investigations against them. Arrest, searches, and seizures. The constitutional right against unreasonable searches and seizures is personal right, invocable only by those whose right have been infringed or threatened to be infringed. What constitutes a reasonable or unreasonable search or seizure in any particular case is purely a judicial question, determinable from a consideration of the circumstances involved. Requisites of a valid warrant. There should be an existence of a probable cause. The probable cause must be personally determined by the judge after personal examination under oath or affirmation of the complainant and the witnesses he may produce, on the basis of their personal knowledge of the facts they are testifying to. There must be particularity in the description of the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized, and the warrant must refer to one specific offense. Generally, the warrant must indicate the particular place to be searched and the person or thing to be seized, except if the nature of the goods to be seized cannot be particularly determined. The nature of the thing in general is the nature of the thing is general in description. The thing is not required of a very technical description, or the thing not is not required for a very technical description. Cases. The search warrant issued to search petitioner's compound for unlicensed firearms was held invalid for failing to describe the place with particularity, considering that the compound was made of 200 buildings, 15 plants, 84 staff house, and 1 airship, etc., spread out over 255 hectares. The description of the property to be seized need not be technically accurate or precise. Its nature will vary according to whether the identity of the property is a matter of concern. The description is required to be specific only insofar as the circumstances will allow. An error in the name of the person in the search warrant does not invalidate the warrant as long as it contains description personae, including additional descriptions that will enable the officer to identify the accused without difficulty. A John Doe search warrant is valid. There is nothing to prevent issue and service of warrant against a party whose name is unknown. A general warrant. It does not describe with particularity the things subject of the search and seizure, or where the probable cause has not been properly established. The effects. Generally, it is a void warrant. Any evidence obtained in violation shall be inadmissible for any purpose in any proceeding. The unconstitutionality of the search and the seizure or the use of a void search warrant renders the items seized inadmissible in evidence, except that general description will not invalidate the entire warrant if other items have been particularly described. Effect of a void warrant of arrest. A void arrest warrant would render the arrest invalid and illegal. The illegality of an arrest does not bar the state from the prosecution of the accused. Despite illegality of both search and arrest, thus inadmissibility of evidence acquired, guilt may still be established through eyewitness testimony. Arrest warrant versus search warrant. An arrest warrant is a written document issued by a court ordering any peace officer to bring the person before the court so that he may be bound to answer for the commission of an offense. A search warrant is an order in writing issued in the name of the people of the Philippines, signed by the judge and directed to a peace officer commanding him to search for certain personal property and bring it before the courts. Warrantless arrests. An arrest can be made by a peace officer or a private person without a warrant in the following instances. In flagrante delicto arrest. When a person to be arrested must execute an overt act indicating that he has committed or is actually committing or is attempting to commit a crime, and such overt act is done in the presence or within the view of the arresting officer. Next, hot pursuit arrest. When an offense has just been committed and the arresting officer has probable cause to believe, based on personal knowledge of facts or circumstances, that the person to be arrested has committed it. And third, the person to be arrested is a prisoner who has escaped from penal establishment or place where he is serving final judgment or is temporarily confined while his case is pending or has escaped while being transferred from one confinement to another. There must be a large measure of immediacy between the time the offense is committed and the time of arrest. If there was an appreciable lapse of time between the arrest and the commission of the crime, a warrant of arrest must be secured. Personal knowledge. There is no personal knowledge when the commission of the crime and identity of the accused were merely furnished by an informant, and when the location of the firearm was given by the wife of the accused. It is not enough that there is a reasonable ground to believe that the person to be arrested has committed the crime. The crime has actually been committed is an essential precondition. Some examples. Rebellion. Since rebellion is a continuing offense, a rebel may be arrested without a warrant at any time of the day or night as he deemed to be in the act of committing rebellion. Kidnapping with serious illegal detention. Though kidnapping with serious illegal detention is deemed A continuing crime, it can be considered as such only when the deprivation of liberty is persistent and continuing from one place to another. By bust when not proper. A buy-bust operation is valid in flagrante arrest. The subsequent search of a person arrested and the premises within his immediate control is valid as an incident to a lawful arrest. Instead of arresting the suspect after the sale in a buy-bust operation, the officer returned to the police headquarters and filed his report. It was only in the evening that he, without warrant, arrested the suspect at his house, where dried marijuana leaves were found and seized. This is unlawful arrest, and the things seized are inadmissible. Drug, alcohol, and blood tests. Randomized drug testing for students and employees does not violate the right to privacy in the Constitution. Students do not have rational expectation of privacy since they are minors and the school is in loco parentis. Employees and students in universities, on the other hand, voluntarily subject themselves to the intrusion because of their contractual relation to the company or the university. But it is unconstitutional to subject criminals to random drug testing. Subjecting criminals to random drug testing would violate their right against self-incrimination. It is also unconstitutional to subject public officials whose qualifications are provided for in the Constitution to random drug testing. Subjecting them to random drug testing would amount to imposing an additional qualification not provided for in the Constitution. Warrantless search incidental to lawful arrest. A person lawfully arrested may be searched for dangerous weapons or anything which may be used as a proof of the commission of an offense without a search warrant. Absent a valid search warrant, the search is confined to the persons being lawfully arrested. It is also general rule that as an incident of an arrest, the place or premises where the arrest was made can also be searched without a search warrant. Test for validity. The item to be searched was within the arrester's custody. Search was contemporaneous with the arrest. An arrest being incipiently illegal, it logically follows that the subsequent search was similarly illegal. The plain view doctrine. Requisites. There is prior valid intrusion based on valid warrantless arrest in which the police are legally present in the pursuit of their official duties. The evidence was inadvertently discovered by the police who had the right to be where they are. The evidence must be immediately apparent, and plain view justified mere seizure of evidence without further search. An object is in plain view if the object itself is plainly exposed to sight. Where the seized object is inside a closed package or the object is not in plain view and therefore it cannot be seized without a warrant. However, if the package proclaims its contents, whether by its distinctive configuration, its transparency, or if its contents are obvious to the observer, then the contents are in plain view and may be seized. It must be immediately apparent to the police that the items that they observe may be evidence of a crime, contraband, or otherwise subject to seizure. Search of a moving vehicle. Stop and search without a warrant at military or police checkpoints have been declared not to be illegal per se, so long as it is required by the exigencies of public order and conducted in a way least intrusive to motorists. Search of moving vehicles should be limited to the following: where the officer merely draws aside the curtain of a vacant vehicle which is parked on the public fairground, simply looks into the vehicle, flashes a light therein without opening the car doors. Where the occupants are not subjected to a physical or body search, where the inspection of the vehicles is limited to a visual search or visual inspection, and where the routine check is conducted in a fixed area. Routine inspections do not give police officers carte blanche discretion to conduct warrantless searches in the absence of probable cause. When the vehicle is stopped and subjected to an extensive search, as opposed to a mere routine inspection, such a warrantless search has been held to be valid only as long as the officers conducting the search have reasonable or probable cause to believe before the search that they will find the instrumentality or evidence pertaining to a crime in the vehicle to be searched. Consented warrantless search. Requisites: it must appear that the right exists. Persons involved had actual or constructive knowledge of the existence of such right, and said person had an actual intent to relinquish that right. Note that mere failure to object to a search and seizure does not constitute a waiver of right. Waiver can be expressed or implied. Voluntary submission to a search precludes later complaint. Presumption against waiver of by the courts. It is the state that has the burden of proving by clear and convincing evidence that the necessary consent was obtained and that it was voluntarily and freely given. Customs search, enforcement of fishing customs, and immigration law. The police are permitted to conduct warrantless searches on behalf of the Department of Customs. They have the authority to open and examine any box, trunk, container if they have reasonable cause to believe that hidden items are subject to customs search. This provision allows police or authorized individuals to pass, enter, and search various locations, excluding dwellings, without the need for warrant. The purpose of these customs searches is to verify whether customs duties and taxes were paid for the imported goods. Routine security checks. The court held that search and seizures of an illegal drug during a routine airport inspection made pursuant to the aviation security procedures is a constitutionally reasonable administrative search. While the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures is guaranteed by Article 3 of the Constitution, a routine security check being conducted in air and seaports has been a recognized exception. For a valid stop and freeze search, the arresting officer must have had personal knowledge of the fact, which would engender a reasonable degree of suspicion of an illicit act. Test whether or not a reasonably prudent man in the circumstances would be warranted in the belief that his safety or that of others was in danger. Test for validity of stop and freeze search as established by jurisprudence. There must be specific and articulable facts which, taken together with rational inferences, reasonably warrant the intrusion. The officer must identify himself and make reasonable inquiries. The frisk is permitted to search for weapons for the protection of the police officer where he has reason to believe that he is dealing with an armed and dangerous individual, regardless of probable cause for a crime. The scope of the search is limited to the outer surface of the subject's clothing. To sustain the validity of stop and freeze search, the arresting officer should have personally observed two or more suspicious circumstances, the totality of which would then create a reasonable inference of criminal activity to compel the arresting officer to investigate further. Exigent and emergency circumstances. The raid and seizure of firearms and ammunition at the height of the 1989 coup d'etat was held valid, considering the exigent and emergency situation. The military operatives had reasonable ground to believe that a crime was being committed, and they had no opportunity to apply for a search warrant from the courts because the latter were closed. Under such urgency and exigency, a search warrant could be validly dispensed with. Administrative arrest. Arrest made as an incident to a deportation proceeding. The power to deport aliens is an attribute of sovereignty and essential to self-preservation of every state. The constitutional provision against unreasonable searches and seizures does not require judicial intervention in the execution of a final order of deportation issued in accordance with law. It contemplates an order of arrest in the exercise of judicial power as a step preliminary or incidental to prosecution or proceedings, or for a given offense or administrative action, not as a measure indispensable to carry out a valid decision by a competent official, such as legal order of deportation issued by the Commissioner of Immigration in pursuance of a valid legislation. In deportation cases, an arrest of an undesirable alien ordered by the President or his authorized representative in order to carry out a final decision of deportation is valid. It is valid, however, because of the recognized supremacy of executive in matters involving foreign affairs. Exclusionary rule. The fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine. All evidence obtained in violation of Article 3, Section 2 shall be inadmissible for any purpose in any proceeding. Once the primary source, the tree, is shown to have been unlawfully obtained, any secondary or derivative evidence, the fruit, derived from it, is also inadmissible. The exclusionary rule extends to evidence obtained through uncounseled confession. The exclusionary rule is also extended to exclude evidence which is derived or directly obtained from that which was illegally seized. Once the primary source is shown to have been unlawfully obtained, any secondary or derivative evidence derived from it is also inadmissible. Effects of unreasonable searches and seizures. An unlawful search will result in the exclusion from admission as evidence of that which was obtained from such unlawful search and seizure. Further, an unlawful search and seizure may justify the use of self-help in the form of resistance to such unlawful search and seizure, the criminal prosecution of the searching officer, the civil damages against such officer, and disciplinary action against the officer by his administrative officers. The privacy of communications and correspondence. The privacy of communication and correspondence shall be inviolable except upon lawful order of the court or when public safety or order requires otherwise as prescribed by law. Any evidence obtained in violation of this shall be inadmissible for any purpose in any proceeding. The three strands of the right to privacy. Decisional privacy. This the liberty in the constitutional sense must mean more than freedom from unlawful governmental restraint. It must include privacy as well. It is to be a repository of freedom. The right to be let alone is indeed the beginning of all freedom. The concept of liberty would be emasculated if it does not likewise compel respect for his personality as a unique individual whose claim to privacy and interference demands respect. Informational privacy. The right of an individual not to have private information about himself disclosed, and the right of an individual to live freely without surveillance and intrusion. Locational or situational privacy is the privacy that is felt in physical space, such as that which may be violated by trespass or unwarranted searches and seizures. Requisites for the existence of the right to privacy. Subjective. A person has exhibited an actual expectation of privacy, and objective. The expectation be one that society is prepared to recognize as reasonable. Right to privacy versus freedom of speech and communication. When intrusion is allowed, generally an encroachment on the right to privacy is invalid when there is reasonable expectation of privacy and there is no compelling state interest, except meaning it is allowed when there is a lawful order of the court, when the public safety or public order required otherwise as may be provided by law. Adopting a unified multipurpose ID system for government does not violate the right to privacy because it narrowly limits the data that can be collected, recorded, and released compared to existing ID systems and provides safeguards to protect the confidentiality of the data collected. Public figure. Being a public figure does not automatically destroy in toto a person's right to privacy. A limited intrusion into an individual's privacy is permissible when they hold a public position and the information at stake pertains to public matters. The essence of right to privacy lies in the safeguarding individuals from undue publicity regarding private matters that fall outside the scope of legitimate public interest. Online privacy. It is first necessary that said user manifest the intention to keep certain posts private through the employment of measures to prevent access thereto or to limit it. Therefore, a Facebook user who hopes to make use of privacy tool to grant or deny access to his or her post or profile details should not be denied the informational privacy right which necessarily accompanies said choice. the Data Privacy Act, personal information refers to any information, whether recorded in a material form or not, from which the identity of the individual is apparent or can be reasonably and directly ascertained by the entity holding the information, or when put together with other information would directly and certainly identify an individual. Sensitive personal information refers to personal information about the individual's race, ethnic origin, marital status, age, color, religion, philosophical, and political affiliations. It is also about the individual's health, education, genetic, or sexual life of a person, or to any proceeding for any offense committed or alleged to have been committed by such person, the disposal of such proceedings, or the sentence of any court in such proceedings, issued by the government agencies peculiar to an individual, which includes but not limited to social security numbers, previous or current health records, licenses or its denials, suspensions or revocations, and tax returns, and specifically established by an executive order or an act of Congress to be kept classified. The exclusionary rule applies not only to testimonial evidence but also to documentary and object evidence. The Anti-Wiretapping Act. It shall be unlawful for any person not being authorized by all the parties to any private communication or spoken word to tap any wire or cable, or by using any other device or arrangement to secretly overhear, intercept, or record such communication or spoken word by using a device commonly known as dictaphone, dictagraph, detectaphone, or walkie-talkie or tape recorder, or however otherwise described. Effect of violation: the communication shall not be admissible in evidence in any judicial, quasi-judicial, legislative, or administrative hearing or investigation. Generally, the provisions of the Bill of Rights are protections against the government, except in the case of Zulueta, the court has recognized an instance where it may also be applied as against private individual. In this case, the wife took her husband's private documents without his consent for use as evidence. The court ruled that marital intimacies do not excuse violating each other's privacy by searching for evidence of marital issues. Marriage does not strip individuals of their integrity of right to privacy, which is protected by the Constitution. Freedom of speech and expression. No law shall be passed abridging freedom of speech, of expression, or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and petition the government for redress and grievances. The concept is that communication, a natural outcome of protected speech, occurs when a speaker utilizes conventional actions, believing they will be understood as intended by the audience, and indeed the audience perceives and interprets these actions accordingly. The scope of freedom of expression is so broad that it extends protection to nearly all forms of communication. It protects speech, print, and assembly regarding secular as well as political causes, and is not confined to any particular field of human interest. Freedom of expression holds paramount importance in our constitutional framework. The fundamental principle grants individuals the liberty to openly and truthfully discuss matters of public interest without fear of censorship or retribution. This right extends across various forms of expression, encompassing speech, conduct, and even inaction used as symbolic communication. The right is not limited to vocal communication. Conduct is also included. Conduct, sometimes referred as symbolic speech, such that when speech and non-speech elements are combined in the same course of conduct, the communicative element of the conduct may be sufficient to bring it into play. Expression and speech include written and spoken words, symbolic and symbolic speech. Prior restraint. This refers to official government restrictions on the press or other forms of expression in advance of actual publication or dissemination. Every man shall have the right to speak, write, and print his opinions upon any subject whatsoever, without any prior restraint, so always that he does not injure any other person in his rights, person, property, or reputation, and so always that he does not thereby disturb the public peace or attempt to subvert the government. Note that all prior that not all prior restraint is invalid, but all prior restraints are presumed invalid. Censorship. Censorship, as controlled by the government, requires prior approval for freedom of expression, making the censor the sole arbiter of political, moral, social, and artistic judgment, often based on subjective standards. Note that any system of prior restraints of expression comes to the court bearing a heavy presumption against the constitutionality, giving the government a heavy burden to show justification for the imposition of such restraint. There need not be total suppression. Even restriction of circulation constitutes censorship. Examples of unconstitutional prior restraint. The COMELEC bans radio commentators and newspaper columnists from discussing issues in a plebiscite. That's unconstitutional. Arbitrary closure of radio stations even with legal justifications like lack of mayor's permit or for reasons like lack of permit. COMELEC prohibits posting decals and stickers on vehicles. Military authorities search, padlock, and search newspaper publishers' offices. Public officials announce bans on media airing or broadcasting. How about valid subsequent punishment? Libel. Every defamatory imputation is presumed to be malicious, even if it be true. Exception to the presumption if there is private communication in the performance of any legal, moral, or social duty. There is fair and true report of any judicial, legislative, or other official proceedings. Obscenity. Determination of what is obscene is a judicial function. Contempt for criticism or publications tending to impede, obstruct, embarrass, or influence the courts in administering justice in a pending suit or proceeding. Right of students to free speech on school premises must not infringe on the school's right to discipline its students. Content-based and content-neutral regulations. A government regulation is sufficiently justified if it is within the constitutional power, it furthers an important substantial government interest, the government interest is unrelated to the suppression of free expression, and the incident restriction is no greater than the essential to the furtherance of that interest. Content-based object of restraint, the message or idea of the expression. Clear and present danger test. There must be a clear and present danger of substantive evil that the state has the right to prevent. Content-neutral object of restraint. The time, manner, place, and expression in public places. Test only a substantial governmental interest is required for its validity. Intermediate approach. Somewhere between the mere rationality that is required of any other law and the compelling interest standard applied to content-based restrictions. Facial challenges and overbreadth doctrine. Generally, a party can question the validity of a statute only if, as applied to him, it is unconstitutional, except in facial challenges. A facial challenge may be directed against a vague statute or to one which is overbroad because of the possible chilling effect that the statute will have on the protected speech. The overbreadth doctrine. This doctrine decrees that a governmental purpose to control or prevent activities constitutionally subject to state regulation may not be achieved by means which sweep unnecessarily broadly and thereby invade the area of protected freedoms. A law is vague when it lacks comprehensive standards that men of common intelligence must necessarily guess at its common meaning and differ as to its application. Test to determine the validity of governmental regulation, the clear and present danger test. The question in every case is whether the words used are used in such circumstances and are of such nature as to create a clear and present danger that they will bring about substantive evils that Congress has the right to prevent. It is a question of proximity and degree. The burden of proof is with the government. This rule also requires that the danger created must not only be clear and present but also traceable to the ideas expressed. clear there must be a connection with the danger of the substantive evil arising from the utterances questioned and present. It involves the time element identified with imminent and immediate danger. Balancing of interest tests. When a particular conduct is regulated in the interest of public order, the regulation results in an incident, conditional and partial abridgment of speech. The duty of the courts is to determine which of the two conflicting interests demands greater protection. The test is applied when two legitimate values not involving national security crimes compete. Factors to consider: the social value of the freedom restricted, the specific thrust of the restriction, the value of the public interest sought to be secured by regulation, whether the restriction is reasonably appropriate and necessary for the protection of the public interest, whether the necessary safeguarding of the public interest may be achieved by a measure less restrictive of the protected freedom. Dangerous tendency test. In each case, courts must seek whether the gravity of the evil, discounted by its improbability, justifies such invasion of free speech as is necessary to avoid the danger. Under this test, the question is whether the words will create a dangerous tendency that the state has a right to prevent. It looks at the probability that the substantive evil will result, and it is not necessary that some definite or immediate acts of force, violence, or unlawfulness be advocated. O'Brien test. The state regulation of different types of mass media. A government regulation is sufficiently justified if it is within the constitutional power, it furthers an important or substantial government interest, the government interest is unrelated to the suppression of the free expression, the incidental restriction is no greater than essential to the furtherance of the interest. Four aspects of freedom of the press. The advertising industry is impressed with public interest and shall be regulated by law for the protection of consumers and the promotion of general welfare. Four aspects of freedom of the press: freedom from prior restraint, freedom from punishment subsequent to publication, freedom of access to information, and freedom of circulation. Commercial speech. Commercial speech is a separate category of speech which is not accorded the same level of protection as that given to other constitutionally guaranteed forms of expression, but is nonetheless entitled to protection. Tests to be applied to regulation on commercial speech. The speech must not be false, misleading, or proposing an illegal activity. The government interest sought to be served by the regulation must be substantial. The regulation must advance government interest, and the regulation must not be overbroad. Political speech. Political speech is pure and protected speech. The government is required to prove a true threat. It cannot punish mere political hyperbole. A tarpaulin that expresses a political opinion constitutes political speech. Speech that promotes dialogue on public affairs or airs out grievances and political discontent should be protected and encouraged. Unprotected speech, libel, and hate speech. Hate speech is a speech designed to promote hatred on the basis of race, religion, ethnicity, or national origin. International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. This mandates the state parties to prohibit by law any advocacy of national, racial, or religious hatred that constitutes incitement to discrimination, hostility, or violence. Libel is not a constitutionally protected speech. The government has an obligation to protect individuals from defamation. The onus of proving malice shifts to the plaintiff, who must prove that the defendants were actuated by ill will in what they caused to be published, with a design to injure the plaintiff. A criminal action was instituted against defendants for allegedly publishing writings which were libelous against a justice of the peace. The Supreme Court held that the said writings constitute qualifiedly privileged matter as public opinion, therefore they cannot be presumed malicious. Obscenity and pornography. Obscenity. The state, in pursuing its mandate to protect as parens patriae the public from obscene, immoral, and indecent materials, must justify the regulation or limitation. One such regulation is Article 201 of the RPC. To be held liable, the prosecution must prove that the materials, publication, pictures, or literature are obscene, and that the offender sold, exhibited, published, and gave it away necessarily that the confiscated materials are obscene must be proved. In Roth versus U.S., whether to the average person applying contemporary community standards, the dominant theme of the material taken as a whole appeals to prurient interest. A work is obscene if the dominant theme is a material taken as a whole appeals to the prurient interest in sex. Material is patently offensive because it affronts contemporary community standards relating to description or representation of sexual matters, and the material is utterly without redeeming social value. A work is obscene whether the average person applying contemporary community standards would find that the work, taken as a whole, appeals to the prurient interest, whether it depicts or describes in an offensive way sexual conduct or excretory functions specifically defined by applicable state law, and whether the work, taken as a whole, lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. Freedom of expression and obscenity determination. Community standard. Pictures depicting inhabitants of the country in their native dress as they appear and can be seen in the regions in which they live are not obscene or indecent. The pictures in question merely depict persons as they actually live without attempted presentation of persons in unusual posture or dress. A dance portraying the life of a widow who lost her husband cannot be considered protected speech if the audience, about 100 customers, was hooling and shouting, "Sige muna, sige." It is erotic during the performance. Child pornography. The state is entitled to greater leeway in the regulation of pornographic depictions of children because a state's interest in safeguarding the physical and psychological well-being of a minor is compelling. The prevention of sexual exploitation and abuse of children constitutes a government objective of surpassing importance. The distribution of photographs and films depicting sexual activity by juveniles is intrinsically related to sexual abuse of children. Advertising and selling child pornography provide an economic motive and thus are integral part of the production of such materials. Value of permitting live performances and photographic reproductions of children engaged in lewd sexual conduct is exceedingly moved. Privileged communication. The doctrine of privileged communication that utterances made in the course of judicial proceedings, including all kinds of pleadings, petitions, and motions, belong to the class of communications that are absolutely privileged, has been expressed in a long line of cases. The doctrine of privileged communication rests upon public policy which looks to the free and unfettered administration of justice, though as an incidental result it may in some instances afford an immunity to the evil disposed and malignant slanderer. While the doctrine is liable to be abused and its abuse may lead to great hardships, yet to give legal action to such libel suits would give rise to greater hardships. The freedom of religion. No law shall be made respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. The free exercise and enjoyment of religious profession and worship without discrimination or preference shall forever be allowed. No religious test shall be required for the exercise of civil or political rights. Non-establishment clause. No public money or property shall be appropriated, applied, paid, or employed directly or indirectly for the use, benefit, or support of any sect, church, denomination, sectarian institution, or system of religion, or any priest, preacher, minister, or other religious teacher or dignitary as such, except when the priest, preacher, minister, or dignitary is assigned in the armed forces or to any penal institution or government orphanage or leprosarium. The clause prohibits excessive government entanglement with the endorsement or disapproval of religion. Permissible acts constitutionally created, tax exemption, charitable institutions, churches, and personages of covenants appertaining thereto, mosque, non-profit cemeteries, and all lands, buildings, and improvements actually directly exclusively used for religious, charitable, and educational purposes shall be exempt from taxation. Operation of sectarian schools. Educational institutions other than those established by religious groups and mission boards shall be owned solely by citizens of the Philippines or corporations or associations at least 60% of capital of which is owned by Filipino citizens. Religious instruction in public schools. At the option expressed in writing by the parents or guardians, religion shall be allowed to be taught to their children or wards in public elementary and high school within the regular class hours by instructors designated or approved by the religious authorities of the religion to which the children or wards belong, without additional cost to the government. And limited public aid to religion. Free exercise cost. Freedom to believe is absolute, but freedom to act on one's belief is subject to regulation. Conduct remains subject to regulation for the protection of society. The freedom to act must have appropriate definitions to preserve the enforcement of that protection. In every case, the power to regulate must be so exercised in attaining a permissible end and not to unduly infringe on the protected freedom. In a nutshell, the Constitution guarantees the freedom to believe absolutely, while the freedom to act based on belief is subject to regulation by the state when necessary to protect the rights of others and in the interest of public welfare. Laws and acts justified under the Free Exercise Clause. Exemption from flag salute in school. Freedom to propagate religious doctrines. The power to tax the exercise of the privilege is the power to control or suppress its enjoyment. Non-disqualification of religious leaders from local government office. Working hours 7:30 to 3:30 without break during Ramadan. Exemption from administrative charge on immorality, cohabiting with a married man with the church sanctions evidenced by a document of declaration of pledging faithfulness in Estrada versus Escritor. The separation of church and state. The principle is based on mutual respect. Generally, the state cannot meddle in the internal affairs of the church, much less question its faith and dogmas or dictate upon it. It cannot favor one religion and discriminate against another. On the other hand, the church cannot impose its beliefs and convictions on the state and the rest of its citizenry. It cannot demand that the nation follow its beliefs even if it sincerely believes that they are good for the country. Acts permitted by non-establishment clause. Prayer and Bible reading in public schools, financial subsidy for parochial schools, religious displays in public spaces, display of granite monument of 10 Commandments in front of the courthouse is unconstitutional for being unmistakably non-secular. Mandatory religious subjects or prohibition of secular subjects in schools, mandatory Bible reading in school, benevolent neutrality, and the doctrine of accommodation. The doctrine of accommodation flexibly upholds the separation of church and state by protecting the religious traditions and practices. It permits the government to consider religion when forming policies aiming to facilitate religious expression without obstruction. Breaching the church-state divide is justified to safeguard religious freedom, the core objective of the religion clauses. Benevolent neutrality allows for accommodating religious-based morality within secular laws as long as it doesn't conflict with compelling state interests. Conscious objectors. Conscious objectors in the RH law impose upon conscientious objector the duty to refer to the patient seeking reproductive health services to another medical practitioner. An objector should be exempt from compliance with the mandates of RH law. If he is compelled to act contrary to his religious belief and conviction, it would be violative of his principle of non-coercion enshrined in the constitutional right to free exercise of religion. The court found no compelling state interest which would limit the free exercise of conscientious objectors. Only the prevention of an immediate danger to the security and welfare of the community can justify the infringement of religious freedom. Tests to determine the validity of governmental regulation: clear and present danger, compelling state interest, benevolent neutrality. Clear and present danger used for religious speech. In order to justify restraint, the court must determine whether the expression presents a clear and present danger of any substantive evil which the state has the right to prevent. Compelling state interest, benevolent neutrality. This is the proper test where conduct arising from religious belief is involved. Has the government's action created a burden on the free exercise? The court must look into sincerity of belief. Is there a compelling state interest to justify the infringement? And are there means to achieve the legitimate state objective, the least intrusive? Liberty of abode and right to travel. The liberty of abode and of changing the same within the limits prescribed by law shall not be impaired except upon lawful order of the court. Neither shall the right to travel be impaired except in the interest of national security, public safety, or public health as may be provided by law. Limitations on liberty of abode. It may be impaired only upon lawful order of the court. The court itself is to be guided by limits prescribed by law. A condition imposed by the court in connection with the grant of bail is an example of valid limitation to liberty. The watch list and hold departure orders. There was no legal basis for the Department Circular Number 41 because of the absence of law authorizing the Secretary of Justice to issue HDOs, watch list orders, and allow departure orders. The court ruled that the issuance of DOJ Circular 41 without a law to justify its action is an unauthorized act of the DOJ, empowering itself under the pretext of dire exigent or urgent necessity. Note that the following have been struck down by the Supreme Court as unconstitutional. The right to information. The right of the people to information on matters of public concern shall be recognized through access to official records and to documents and papers pertaining to official acts, transactions, or decisions, as well as to government research data used as the basis for policy development, shall be afforded to all citizens subject to such limitations as may be provided by law. Subject to reasonable conditions prescribed by law, the state adopts and implements a policy of full public disclosure of all its transactions involving public interest. The state shall provide the policy environment for the full development of Filipino capability and the emergence of the communication structures suitable to the needs and aspirations of the nation and the balanced flow of information into, out of, and across the country, in accordance with the policy that respects the freedom of speech and of the press. Policy of full public disclosure. It covers all transactions involving public interest, including any matter contained in the official communications and public communications of the government agency. It does not require demand. It pertains to the duty to disclose of the government pursuant to the policy of full public disclosure. The right to information covers matters of public concern, documents pertaining to official acts, official records, government research data used as basis for policy development, matters of public concern and jurisprudence, loanable funds of GSIS, civil service eligibility of senatorial employees, appointments made to public offices, and the utilization of public property. Right to information covers na ulit. Two requisites must concur before the right to information may be compelled by a writ of mandamus. The information sought must be in relation to matters of public concern or public interest. It must not be exempt by law from the operation of the constitutional guarantee and the restrictions to right to information. The right of the people to information must be balanced against other genuine interests necessary for the proper functioning of the government. Eminent domain. The power of eminent domain is the inherent right of the state to condemn private property to public use upon payment of just compensation. The right to eminent domain is the ultimate right of the sovereign power to appropriate not only the public but the private property of all citizens within the territorial sovereignty to public purpose. The two mandatory requirements should underlie the government's exercise of the power of eminent domain. It is for a particular public purpose, and just compensation should be paid to the property owner. It is well settled that eminent domain is an inherent power of the state that need not be granted even by fundamental law. Article 3 merely imposes a limit on the government's exercise of this power. Public use. Public use has been liberalized not just to cover causes of actual use by the government for traditional public services, but to redistributive purposes. Public use includes not only the use directly available to the public but also those which redound to their indirect benefit. As long as the public has the right to use, whether exercised by one or many members of the public, a public advantage or public benefit accrues sufficient to constitute a public use. Just compensation. Generally, it is computed at the time of the filing of the complaint for expropriation, except that at the time of the actual taking, when taking precedes filing the complaint, at the time of the payment, after the inequitable lapse of time since the actual taking and the government's offer to pay. Inflation will not be considered in determining what the value of the property is for the purposes of computing just compensation. Expropriation by LGUs. For expropriation by local government, specific requisites must be met, including enactment of an ordinance, payment of just compensation of course, and a valid offer to the owner. The right to association. The right of the people, including those employed in the public and private sectors, to form unions, associations, or societies for purposes not contrary to law shall not be abridged. Article 13, Section 3, the state shall afford full protection to labor, local and overseas, organized and unorganized, and promote full employment and equality of employment opportunities for all. It shall guarantee the rights of all workers to self-organization, collective bargaining and negotiations, and peaceful concerted activities, including the right to strike in accordance with law. They shall be entitled to security of tenure, humane conditions of work, and a living wage. They shall also participate in policy and decision-making processes affecting their rights and benefits as may be provided by law. The right to self-organization shall not be denied to government employees. The freedom not to associate. While freedom of association includes the freedom not to associate, the government actions that intrude into a group's internal affairs, such as forcing it to accept unwanted members, are unconstitutional if they significantly affect the group's ability to advocate its viewpoints. The non-impairment of contracts. Article 3, Section 10. No law impairing the obligation of contracts shall be passed. Non-impairment clause ensures that the integrity of contracts is protected from any unwarranted state interference. It ensures that the terms of a contract mutually agreed upon by the parties are not tampered with or modified by a subsequent law. This provision prohibits the passing of a law that changes the terms of an already existing contract, which changes the terms of the contract between the parties, imposes new conditions, dispenses with those agreed upon, or withdraws remedies for the enforcement of the rights of the parties. Free access to courts and adequate legal assistance. Section 11 of Article 3, Free access to courts. The Constitution guarantees free access to the courts and quasi-judicial bodies and adequate legal assistance which shall not be denied to any person by reason of poverty. The concept is that the free access clause is based on a person's poverty, applicable only to natural persons. Extending fee exemption to juridical persons could be abused by corporations to circumvent the rule. What is an indigent party? A party may be authorized to litigate as an indigent if they lack sufficient money or property for basic necessities. Indigent status exempts the party from payment of docket and other lawful fees. Free access to courts does not mean courts cannot impose filing fees. Exemption of cooperatives from payment of court and sheriff fees no longer applies under 6938 as amended by RA 9520. Custodial investigation. Section 12 of the Constitution outlines the rights of a person under custodial investigation, which include the right to remain silent and the right to have competent and independent counsel, preferably of his own choice. These rights cannot be waived except in writing and in the presence of his counsel. Additionally, the use of torture, force, violence, threats, intimidation, and any other means to vitiate free will is prohibited. Confessions or admissions obtained in violation of these are deemed inadmissible in evidence against the person. It involves any questioning. Custodial investigation involves any questioning initiated by law enforcement, particularly when the focus shifts to a particular suspect who has been taken into police custody. This includes issuing invitations to individuals suspected of committing an offense. A custodial investigation report must be reduced to writing by the investigating officer and explained to the person arrested or detained by counsel or assisting counsel in a language known to them. Failure to comply with this requirement renders the report null and void. The Miranda warning. During custodial investigation, the person must be informed of the following: his right to remain silent and that any statement made by him may be used as evidence against him, the right to have a competent and independent counsel of his own choice, his right to be informed of the first two rights. Yan. The show-up and police line-up. Generally, there is no right to counsel during show-up and police line-up procedures, except when the right to counsel is applicable if the procedure becomes accusatory. This occurs when the investigators attempt to elicit admissions, confessions, or information from the suspect, even if seemingly innocent at the time. Extrajudicial confession. Extrajudicial confession by a person arrested, detained, or under custodial investigation shall be in writing, signed in the presence of his counsel or in the latter's absence upon a valid waiver, and in the presence of his parents, older brother, spouse, municipal mayor, municipal judge, district school supervisor, priest, or minister of gospel as chosen by him. Otherwise, such extrajudicial confession shall be inadmissible as evidence in any proceeding. The rights of the persons arrested, detained, or under custodial investigation. The right to remain silent. The warning is necessary to make the person under custodial investigation aware of their right. It informs the individual that anything said can be and will be used against him in court. Failure to provide this warning can affect the individual's decision regarding the exercise of their right to remain silent. The right to counsel. Any person arrested, detained, or under custodial investigation must be assisted by counsel at all times. The counsel should be competent and independent, preferably of the suspect's own choice. Lawyers with conflicting interests, such as a special counsel, prosecutor, or counsel of the police, are not considered independent. Failure to request a lawyer does not constitute a waiver of the right to counsel. No effective waiver of the right to counsel during interrogation can be recognized unless specifically made after warnings have been given. The request for assistance of counsel before any interrogation cannot be ignored or denied by authorities. This procedure aims to protect the right of individuals during custodial investigation and ensure fair treatment under the law. The right to visitation and conference. Any person arrested or detained under custodial investigation shall be allowed visits by or conferences with any member of his immediate family or any medical doctor or priest or religious minister chosen by him or by any member of his immediate family or by his counsel or by any national non-governmental organization duly accredited by the Commission on Human Rights and by any international non-governmental organization duly accredited by the Office of the President. The person's immediate family shall include his or her spouse, fiancé, parent, child, brother or sister, grandparent, godchild, uncle or aunt, nephew or niece, and guardian or ward. The rights of the accused. No person shall be held to answer for a criminal offense without due process of law. In all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall be presumed innocent until the contrary is proved. They shall enjoy the right to be heard by themselves and counsel, to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusations against them, to have speedy, impartial, and public trial, to meet the witnesses face to face, and to have compulsory process to secure the attendance of witness and the production of evidence on their behalf. However, after arraignment, the trial may proceed notwithstanding the absence of the accused, provided they have been duly notified and their failure to appear is unjustifiable. The rights of the accused during trial, under the rules of court, to be presumed innocent, to be informed of the nature and cause of and accusations against him, to be present and defend himself and by counsel, to testify as a witness in their own behalf, subject to cross-examination, to be exempt from being compelled to be a witness against himself, to confront and cross-examine the witnesses against him, to have compulsory process issued to secure the attendance of the witness and production of evidence on his behalf, to have speedy, impartial, and public trial, to appeal in all cases. Criminal due process. In criminal proceedings, due process is satisfied when the accused is informed of the charges against him, provided with an opportunity to rebut evidence, and judged by a competent court within the authority of constitutional law. So the requisites: the accused is heard by a court of competent jurisdiction, the accused is proceeded against under the orderly process of law, the accused is given notice and opportunity to be heard, and the judgment rendered is within the authority of constitutional law. Bail. All persons, except those charged with offenses punishable of reclusion perpetua when evidence of guilt is strong, shall, before conviction, be bailable by sufficient sureties or be released on recognizance as may be provided by law. The right to bail shall not be impaired even when the privilege of writ of habeas corpus is suspended. Excessive bail shall not be required. Bail is a security given for the release of a person in the custody of law, furnished by him or a bondsman, to guarantee his appearance before the court as required under the conditions hereinafter specified. Bail may be given in any form of corporate surety, cash, property bond, or recognizance. Equipoise rule. The presumption of innocence has given rise to a jurisprudential rule referred to as the equipoise rule, where the evidence adduced by the parties is evenly balanced. The constitutional presumption of innocence should tilt the balance in favor of the accused. The application is triggered by a situation where the court is faced with the conflicting versions of the prosecution and the defense, and the evidence, facts, and circumstances are capable of two or more explanations. One is consistent with his innocence and one consistent with his guilt. The right to counsel. So any person under investigation for the commission of an offense shall have the right to be informed of his right to remain silent and to have a competent and independent counsel, preferably of his own choice. So, in all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall be entitled to be present and defend in person and by counsel at every stage of the proceeding from the arraignment to promulgation of judgment. The right to speedy disposition of cases. All persons shall have the right to speedy disposition of their cases before all judicial, quasi-judicial, or administrative bodies. The right to a speedy disposition of case, like the right to a speedy trial, is deemed violated only when the proceeding is attended by vexatious, capricious, and oppressive delays. The right against self-incrimination. No person shall be compelled to be a witness against himself. The right against self-incrimination secures to a witness, whether he is a party or not, the right to refuse to answer any particular incriminating question. It prescribes an option of refusal to answer incriminating questions and not a prohibition of inquiry. The purpose is the self-incrimination clause is meant to avoid placing the witness against the strongest temptation to commit perjury and extorting a confession by force. Immunity statutes. Immunity statute seeks a rational accommodation between the imperatives of an individual's constitutional right against self-incrimination and the legitimate governmental interest in securing testimony. By voluntarily offering to give information on the commission of a crime and to testify against the culprits, a person opens himself to investigation and prosecution if he himself had participated in the criminal act. To secure his testimony without exposing him to the risk of prosecution, the law recognizes that the witness can be given immunity from prosecution. In this manner, the state interest is satisfied while respecting the individual's constitutional right against self-incrimination. Transactional immunity. The Commission on Human Rights shall have the following powers and functions: grant immunity from the prosecution to any person whose testimony or whose possession of documents or other evidence is necessary or convenient to determine the truth in any investigation conducted by it or under its authority. The right against double jeopardy. No person shall be twice put in jeopardy for punishment for the same offense. If an act is punished by law and an ordinance, conviction or acquittal under either shall constitute a bar to another prosecution of the same act. However, this does not apply in administrative cases, but it applies in contempt cases. Acquittal effectively bars a second prosecution. Requisites to For first jeopardy to attach, a previous case must be filed and must contain the following: there must be a complaint or information or other formal charge sufficient in form and substance to sustain conviction. The complaint or information is filed before a court of competent jurisdiction. The accused must have been convicted or acquitted, or the case against him was dismissed or otherwise terminated without his express consent, and the accused has been arraigned and has pleaded to the charges. Appeal by prosecution when allowed. Generally, a judgment of acquittal is final and no longer reviewable. It cannot be considered because it places the accused in jeopardy for the same offense, except deprivation of due process, where the prosecution is deprived of a fair opportunity to prosecute and prove its case, provided that the judge considered the evidence even if the application of the evidence leading to acquittal is erroneous. An appeal or motion for reconsideration by the prosecution will not be allowed. There is mistrial, or there is grave abuse of discretion amounting to lack or excess of jurisdiction. Right against excessive fines and cruel and inhumane punishments. Excessive fines shall not be imposed, nor cruel, degrading, or inhuman punishment inflicted. Neither shall death penalty be imposed unless for compelling reasons involving heinous crimes. The Congress hereafter provides for it. Any death penalty already imposed shall be reduced to reclusion perpetua. The employment of physical, psychological, or degrading punishment against any prisoner or detainee, or the use of substandard or inadequate penal facilities under subhuman conditions shall be dealt with by law. Non-imprisonment for debts. No person shall be imprisoned for debt or non-payment of a poll tax. Debt refers to any civil obligation arising from a contract. It includes even debts obtained through fraud, since no distinction is made in the Constitution. Poll tax refers to a specific sum levied upon any person belonging to a certain class without regard to property or occupation. In a case where the accused was convicted and imprisoned for estafa, where the accused failed to render promised service to the injured in exchange for the latter's retrieval of the former cedula, the court held that the imprisonment was correct since it was for estafa and not involuntary servitude or imprisonment for debt. Ex post facto law. An ex post facto law is any law that makes an action done before the passage of the law which was innocent when done, criminal, and punishes such action. Ex post facto law, unless they are favorable to the defendant, are prohibited. It is ex post facto law if it makes an act which was innocent when done, criminal, and punishes such action. It aggravates a crime, or makes it greater than when it was committed, or it changes the punishment and inflicts a greater punishment than the law annexed to the crime when it was committed. It alters the legal rules of evidence and receives less or different testimony than the law required at the time of the commission of the offense in order to convict the defendant. It assumes to regulate civil rights and remedies only. In effect, imposes penalty or deprivation of a right for something which even then was lawful. It deprives a person accused of a crime of some lawful protection to which he has become entitled, such as protection of a former conviction or acquittal, or a proclamation of amnesty. The Bill of Attainder. It is generally understood as a legislative act which inflicts punishment on individuals or members of a particular group without judicial trial. A Bill of Attainder encroaches on the court's power to determine the guilt or innocence of the accused and to impose the corresponding penalty, violating the doctrine of separation of powers. The two kinds of Bill of Attainder: the Bill of Attainder proper, which is the legislative imposition of death penalty, and Bill of Pains and Penalties, the imposition of a lesser penalty. The writ of habeas corpus. The writ of habeas corpus is a speedy and effectual remedy to relieve persons from unlawful restraint. It secures a prisoner the right to have the cause of his detention examined and determined by court of justice, and to have it ascertained whether he is held under lawful authority. The purpose of the writ shall extend to all cases of illegal confinement or detention by which any person is deprived of his liberty, or by which the rightful custody of any person is withheld from the person entitled thereto. The primary purpose of the writ is to inquire into all manner of involuntary restraint as distinguished from voluntary, and to relieve a person therefrom if such restraint is illegal. Any restraint which will preclude freedom of action is sufficient. The writ of kalikasan. This is a remedy available to a natural or juridical person, entity authorized by law, people's organization, non-governmental organization, or any public interest group accredited by or registered with any government agency on behalf of persons whose constitutional right to a balanced and healthful ecology is violated or threatened with violation by an unlawful act or omission of a public official or employee or private individual or entity involving environmental damage of such magnitude as to prejudice the life, health, or property of inhabitants in two or more cities or provinces. The writ of habeas data. It is a remedy available to any person whose right to privacy in life, liberty, or security is violated or threatened by an unlawful act or omission of a public official or employee, or of a private individual or entity engaged in gathering, collecting, or storing of data or information regarding the person, family, home, and correspondence of the aggrieved party. And last, the writ of amparo. This is a remedy available to any person whose right to life, liberty, or security is violated or threatened with violation by an unlawful act or omission of a public official or employee, or of a private individual or entity. The writ shall cover extralegal killings and enforced disappearances or threats thereof.